What if I told you that your unhappiness has almost nothing to do with your circumstances, and almost everything to do with a habit you don't even know you have? Not a habit of action. A habit of thought. Every day, your mind runs the same patterns, comparing, worrying, criticizing, replaying, like software running silently in the background. You didn't install it. But it's controlling everything. The Buddha recognized this trap thousands of years ago and offered a way out. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Today, we're going to explore how to interrupt those invisible patterns and train your mind to find beauty, gratitude, and calm, right where you are, right as you are. Part 1, The Garden of the Mind, a Buddhist parable about thoughts as seeds of reality. In the foothills of the Himalayas, centuries ago, there lived a Buddhist monk known simply as Master Ananda. He wasn't famous. He didn't lead a large monastery. He lived in a small hut beside a garden that travelers came from distant villages just to see. And what a garden it was! Flowers of every color, deep violet, sun-kissed gold, gentle white, bloomed in perfect harmony. The air around it smelled of jasmine and peace. Birds sang from the branches of a great Bodhi tree at its center. It was, by all accounts, the most beautiful garden anyone had ever seen. One day, a young woman named Sita arrived at the monk's door. She was exhausted, not physically, but in her spirit. Her face was drawn. Her eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. She had traveled 3 days on foot just to ask Master Ananda one question. "Master," she said, barely above a whisper, "my mind is filled with darkness. I try to think good thoughts, but the bad ones always return. I try to be positive, but negativity follows me like a plague. What is wrong with me? Am I cursed?" Master Ananda didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured for her to follow him into the garden. They walked in silence for a while, past rows of blooming orchids and beds of fragrant lavender. Then the monk stopped beside a patch of earth that was bare, nothing growing in it at all. "What do you see here?" he asked. "Nothing," Sita replied. "Just empty soil." The monk nodded. "And what would happen if I planted a thorny weed here?" "A thorny weed would grow. And if I planted a rose instead?" "A rose would grow." Master Ananda knelt beside the soil and looked up at Sita with gentle eyes. "Your mind is this soil, child. It does not judge what is planted in it. It simply grows whatever seed it receives. You say your mind is filled with darkness, but I ask you, what seeds have you been planting? What thoughts have you been watering, day after day, without even noticing?" He stood slowly and continued. "The weeds in your mind were not planted by a curse. They were planted by habit. By the stories you repeat to yourself. By the fears you rehearse each night before sleep. By the criticisms you absorbed from others and then made your own." He plucked a small weed from the edge of the garden. "But here is the beautiful truth. Just as you planted these weeds unknowingly, you can plant flowers knowingly. Seed by seed. Thought by thought. Day by day." Sita looked at the garden with new eyes. She realized that this breathtaking paradise hadn't happened by accident. It was the result of years of careful, deliberate cultivation. Every flower was a choice. Every bloom was an act of patience. And her mind could become the same. This parable captures the essence of what the Buddha called satana, intention. In Buddhist psychology, every moment of consciousness carries an intention, and that intention determines what grows in the garden of our experience. The Anguttara Nikaya, one of the great collections of the Buddha's teachings, states, It is volition that I call action. Having willed, one acts through body, speech, and mind. In other words, the seeds of your reality are not random. They are planted by your intentions, conscious or unconscious. And the most transformative realization is this: once you become aware of the planting, you gain the power to choose what grows. But this raises a crucial question: if we have this power, why do so many of us feel trapped in cycles of negativity? The answer lies in something the Buddha understood deeply, something our modern world has amplified to an unprecedented degree. Part 2: The Noise Within: How Modern Life Hijacks Your Mind and Why Mindful Awareness is the Antidote. Let's step out of the ancient monastery and into the present day. Meet James. James is a 28-year-old software engineer living in a busy city. On paper, his life looks fine. He has a stable job, a small apartment, and friends he sees on weekends. But inside, James is drowning. Not in any visible way. He smiles at work. He responds to messages. He looks, to the outside world, like someone who has it together. But every night, when the world goes quiet, James lies awake staring at the ceiling. His mind races. He replays conversations from weeks ago, analyzing every word he said, convincing himself he sounded foolish. He scrolls through social media and watches people his age buying houses, getting promotions, traveling the world, and he feels a cold knot of inadequacy tighten in his chest. He doesn't realize it, but James has been feeding his mind a very specific diet, and it's slowly poisoning him. Every morning begins with the news, stories carefully designed to trigger fear and outrage, because fear and outrage keep people watching. Then comes social media, an endless highlight reel of other people's best moments, algorithmically engineered to make him feel like he's falling behind. Then come the work emails, urgent, demanding, relentless. By 9 a.m., James's nervous system is in overdrive. His mind is scanning for threats that don't exist. His body is tense. His breathing is shallow. And he hasn't even noticed, because this state has become his normal. This is what the Buddha would recognize as avijja, ignorance. Not ignorance in the sense of stupidity, but in the sense of not seeing clearly. James doesn't see that his suffering isn't coming from his life. It's coming from his relationship with his thoughts about his life. He has confused the map with the territory. The stories his mind tells him, I'm not enough, I'm falling behind, something is wrong with me, feel like facts. But they're not facts. They're habits. They're well-worn neural pathways that fire automatically because they've been reinforced thousands of times. And here's the critical insight that Buddhist practice offers: you are not your thoughts. Let me say that again, because it might be the most important thing you hear today. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind the thoughts. You are the sky, vast, open, unchanging, and your thoughts are the weather. Storms come. Clouds gather. Rain falls. But the sky remains. It has always remained. It will always remain. The practice of mindfulness, what the Buddha called sati, is simply the act of remembering that you are the sky. It's the practice of stepping back from the storm of thinking and observing it with calm, non-judgmental awareness. When James learns to pause, even for 30 seconds, and simply watch his thoughts without believing every single one of them, something remarkable happens. The grip loosens. The spiral slows. He begins to see his thoughts not as commands to be obeyed, but as suggestions to be examined. I'm not enough. Is that true? Or is that a story I've been telling myself? I'm falling behind. Behind what? Behind whom? According to whose timeline? Something is wrong with me. Or is something very right with me, and I've simply forgotten how to see it? This is the power of mindful awareness. It doesn't eliminate negative thoughts. It does something far more profound. It gives you the space to choose whether to follow them. The Buddha expressed this with extraordinary clarity in the Vitakkasanthana Sutta. When a monk is attending to some sign, and owing to that sign there arise in him evil, unwholesome thoughts, he should attend to another sign connected with what is wholesome. Then the evil thoughts are abandoned and subside. In modern language, when a harmful thought pattern arises, redirect your attention, consciously, deliberately, towards something wholesome. Not through force. Not through resistance. But through gentle redirection, the way you might guide a small child away from a busy road, with firmness, yes, but also with tenderness. This is not suppression. This is cultivation. And the difference matters enormously. If this teaching resonates with you, take a moment right now to subscribe to Buddha Coha and share this with someone who might be caught in their own mental storm. Sometimes, a single teaching at the right moment can change the entire direction of a life. Part 3, The Lotus in the Mud, Transforming Suffering into Wisdom Through Reframing and Gratitude. There is no symbol more central to Buddhism than the lotus flower. And there's a reason for that. The lotus doesn't grow in pristine, crystal clear water. It doesn't bloom on mountaintops or in manicured gardens. The lotus grows in mud. In murky, dark, thick mud. It pushes through the muck, rises through the water, and when it finally breaks the surface, it blooms into one of the most exquisite flowers on earth. And here is the teaching hidden inside that image: the mud is not the enemy of the flower. The mud is its nourishment. Without the mud, there is no lotus. Without suffering, there is no wisdom. This doesn't mean we should seek out suffering or glorify pain. But it means that when suffering arrives, as it inevitably will, we have a choice in how we meet it. Consider a woman named Mei Lin. Mei Lin is 51 years old. 3 years ago, she was diagnosed with a chronic illness that changed everything. She could no longer work the way she used to. She had to give up activities she loved. Some days, just getting out of bed required more courage than she thought she had. In the beginning, Mei Lin was consumed by bitterness. She asked the same questions many of us ask when life turns upside down: why me? What did I do to deserve this? This isn't fair. And those questions are natural. They're human. There is no shame in asking them. But Mei Lin noticed something troubling. The more she asked those questions, the worse she felt. Not because the questions were wrong, but because they kept her focused on what had been taken away, and blind to what remained. Then one afternoon, while sitting in a hospital waiting room, Mei Lin picked up a small book of Buddhist teachings someone had left on a chair. She opened it randomly and read, "Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional." She read it again. And again. And something inside her, something buried beneath months of grief and resistance, began to stir. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. The pain of her illness was real. She couldn't change it. But the suffering, the layer upon layer of resentment, self-pity, and resistance she had wrapped around the pain, that was something she was adding. Unconsciously, habitually, but she was adding it. What if she could learn to experience the pain without all the extra suffering? Mei Lin began a simple practice that transformed her life. Each evening, she sat quietly and wrote down 5 things she was grateful for. Not grand things. Simple things. The sunlight on my face this morning. My daughter's laughter on the phone. The taste of ginger tea. A stranger who held the door open for me. The fact that I can still breathe, still think, still love. At first, it felt forced. Her mind resisted. What's the point of being grateful when everything is falling apart? But she persisted. Day after day. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the texture of her experience began to change. She didn't stop having bad days. The pain didn't disappear. But she began to notice something extraordinary. Alongside the pain, there was also beauty. Alongside the loss, there was also love. Alongside the darkness, there were also countless tiny lights that she had been too consumed by suffering to notice. Gratitude didn't change her circumstances. It changed her eyes. The Buddha taught in the Salatha Sutta, the discourse on the arrow, that when we experience pain, it is like being struck by an arrow. But then we often shoot ourselves with a second arrow, the arrow of our mental reaction. The worry, the anger, the why me, the catastrophizing. The first arrow is unavoidable. The second arrow is a choice. Mei Lin learned to feel the first arrow without reaching for the second. And in doing so, she discovered something the lotus has always known: the mud doesn't have to define you. It can become the very ground from which your most beautiful self emerges. Part 4. Becoming who you already are, visualization and self-compassion as Buddhist tools for transformation. There is a teaching in Mahayana Buddhism that never fails to move me. It says, every being already possesses Buddha nature. Enlightenment is not something you achieve, it is something you uncover. Think about that for a moment. You don't have to become good. You don't have to earn peace. You don't have to prove your worthiness. The goodness, the peace, the worthiness, they're already inside you, right now, buried perhaps beneath years of conditioning, self-doubt, and pain, but there, nonetheless. Waiting to be uncovered. Like a diamond covered in dust. And two of the most powerful tools for this uncovering are visualization and self-compassion. Let me tell you about a man named Robert. Robert is 60 years old. He spent most of his life being hard on himself. Growing up, he was told that love had to be earned. That rest was laziness. Those mistakes were unforgivable. He internalized these beliefs so deeply that they became the operating system of his mind, running silently in the background, shaping every decision, every relationship, every quiet moment alone. By the time Robert reached 55, he was successful by every external measure: career, home, and financial stability. But inside, he was exhausted. Hollow. He felt like he had been performing his entire life, and he no longer remembered who he was beneath the performance. A friend recommended he try meditation. Robert resisted at first. That's for other people, he thought. Calmer people. Spiritual people. Not people like me. But desperation has a way of opening doors that pride keeps shut. Robert began with just 5 minutes a day. Sitting. Breathing. And for the first time in decades, simply being, without doing, without achieving, without performing. And what he encountered in those quiet minutes terrified him. He encountered his own inner voice. And it was brutal. You're a fraud. You've wasted your life. You don't deserve happiness. Years, decades, of self-criticism, compressed into a relentless inner monologue that played on repeat, usually just below the level of conscious awareness. But Robert's meditation teacher gave him a practice that changed everything. It was a form of meta-meditation, loving-kindness meditation, and it began with the hardest step of all, directing compassion toward himself. Each morning, Robert would sit quietly, place his hand over his heart, and repeat, "May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I live with ease. May I forgive myself for what I could not know until I knew it." The last phrase hit him hardest every time. May I forgive myself for what I could not know until I knew it. Because that's the truth, isn't it? We make decisions based on the understanding we have at the time. We do the best we can with the tools we possess. And then, later, when we know better, we look back and judge ourselves as if we should have known all along. But you couldn't. And punishing yourself for past ignorance doesn't create future wisdom. Only compassion does. Robert also began practicing visualization, a technique with deep roots in Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Each morning, after his loving-kindness meditation, he would close his eyes and visualize himself moving through his day as the person he wished to become. Not a perfect person. Not a saint. Just a kinder version of himself. He imagined himself responding to frustration with patience. He saw himself listening to his adult children, really listening, without interrupting or judging. He visualized himself looking in the mirror and, instead of cataloging flaws, simply saying, "You are enough." In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, this is called creative visualization, and it is considered a legitimate form of mental training. The great master Adisha taught, "The greatest achievement is selflessness. The greatest worth is self-mastery. The greatest quality is seeking to serve others. The greatest meditation is a mind that lets go." Robert's visualization practice wasn't about escaping reality. It was about rehearsing a better relationship with reality. And because the brain responds to vivid mental imagery almost as powerfully as it responds to experience, Robert was literally rewiring his neural pathways, building new roads in his mind where only old, painful ones had existed before. Within a year, Robert's life began to reflect his inner changes. He spoke more gently, to others and to himself. He apologized to his children for years of emotional distance. He started volunteering at a local shelter, not out of obligation, but because giving made him feel connected to something larger than his own story. He didn't become a different person. He became more fully himself, the self that had always been there, hidden beneath layers of armor he no longer needed. Part 5. Your Path Forward. 5 Buddhist-Inspired Practices to Train Your Mind Starting Today. So here we are, at the crossroads between knowing and doing. Because knowledge without practice is like a lamp without oil. It has potential, but it cannot shine. Let me offer you 5 practices, simple, accessible, and rooted in the wisdom we've explored today, that you can begin tonight. Practice 1. Morning Intention Setting. Before you check your phone, before you read the news, before the world rushes in, sit for just 2 minutes. Close your eyes. Take 3 slow breaths. And set one simple intention for the day. It could be, today, I will be patient with myself. Or, today, I will notice one beautiful thing. Or simply, today, I will breathe. This small act anchors your mind before the current of the day pulls you downstream. Practice 2. The mindful pause. 3 times today, morning, afternoon, and evening, stop whatever you're doing for 60 seconds. Just stop. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice the air on your skin. Listen to whatever sounds surround you. This isn't meditation in any formal sense. It's a micro-awakening. A tiny reminder that you are alive, you are here, and this moment, this exact moment, is the only one that truly exists. Practice 3. The Gratitude Inventory. Before sleep tonight, place your hand on your heart and name 5 things you experienced today that carried even a trace of goodness. They don't need to be extraordinary. A warm cup of coffee. A moment of laughter. The softness of your pillow. A song that made you feel something. A breath that came easily. By naming these things, you are teaching your brain to scan for light instead of darkness. And over time, you will be astonished by how much light there is. Practice 4. Compassionate self-talk. The next time you catch your inner voice being cruel, and you will catch it, once you start paying attention, pause. And respond to yourself the way you would respond to a dear friend who came to you in pain. Say, I see that you're struggling. That's okay. You're doing the best you can. And I'm here for you. This isn't a weakness. This is the deepest form of courage, the courage to be gentle with yourself in a world that constantly demands you be harder. Practice 5. Evening visualization. Before you fall asleep, close your eyes and spend just 3 minutes seeing yourself as you wish to be. Not in some distant, unattainable future, but tomorrow. See yourself waking with calm. See yourself handling a difficult conversation with grace. See yourself smiling, not because everything is perfect, but because you've learned that perfection was never the point. Plant that image in your mind like a seed in fertile soil. And then let go. Let sleep water it. Let your unconscious mind tend to it through the night. Closing, ancient wisdom for the modern soul. We've traveled a long way together today, from the misty gardens of an ancient monastery, through the sleepless nights of modern life, into the murky waters where the lotus grows, and finally, into the quiet sanctuary of your own heart. And if there is one thing I hope you carry with you from this journey, it is this. You are not stuck with the mind you have. You can cultivate the mind you choose. Not overnight. Not perfectly. Not without setbacks and stumbles and days when you forget everything you've learned. But steadily. Patiently. Drop by drop. The Buddha's final words to his disciples were, "Work out your own salvation. Do not depend on others. Be a lamp unto yourself. Be a lamp unto yourself. Not because no one else matters, but because the light you carry within is the only light you can truly rely on. And when you tend that light, when you protect it from the winds of negativity, nurture it with gratitude and compassion, and fuel it with conscious, loving intention, it doesn't just illuminate your own path. It shines for everyone around you." Thich Nhat Hanh, the beloved Vietnamese Zen master, put it this way. Sometimes your joy is the source of your smile. But sometimes, your smile can be the source of your joy. Start with the smile. Start with the intention. Start with one small, deliberate thought. Today, I will look for the good, and watch how the world rearranges itself in response. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You are the garden. You are the gardener. And every thought you plant from this moment forward is a choice, a sacred, powerful, irreversible choice, about the kind of life that will bloom from within you. Choose flowers. Choose carefully. Choose compassionately. And never, ever underestimate the power of a single, well-planted seed. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your open heart and your willingness to grow. If this teaching spoke to you, if it stirred something quiet and true inside you, please subscribe to Buddha Coha, leave a comment sharing which part resonated most, and share this video with someone who might need these words today. Together, we can plant seeds of wisdom that bloom far beyond what any of us can imagine. Until we meet again, may you be happy. May you be peaceful. May your mind be a garden of infinite beauty. And may you always, always remember. The good is already here. It has always been here. You just needed to learn where to look.